lot of times when you meet your heroes, you meet celebrities, they do not live up to what your image of them is.
Absolutely.
But Leonard Nimoy did. So I wanted to go up and I wanted to talk to him, and a lot of people were doing that. It wasn't just me, and everybody was coming up to talk to him. And so I was kind of like waiting around, and he turns around with his cheese and cracker, and there's a giant man standing there,
right.
And he goes, "I came up with the idea for Star Trek 4 before you did." And Leonard Nimoy looks at him and goes, "Oh, okay," and like walked away.
Wow.
Into the other room, and I was like, good for him.
Time to talk about games, played by Ryan and Mike. A modern, a retro video game show. Yes, we talk about games and sometimes other stuff like Star Trek. It's a blast, our gaming podcast.
Welcome back to another podcast episode of Talk About Games. I'm here with Ryan. Once again, the idea of this show is each of us bring a video game to the table. I take stuff that I've been playing on Twitch, Ryan, whatever he's been playing lately, and we're going to get into that. But first, we want to talk a little bit, of course, about Star Trek, which is usual for us because we're both big Star Trek fans and we kind of always gravitate towards that. But the reason we're bringing it up is because Fathom Events is going to be showing very soon this month Star Trek 4, which is my favorite Star Trek movie. And since we're doing this podcast, I have to get my Star Trek story out of my Star Trek 4 story out of the way. But go ahead.
I can't imagine that we're going to talk about Star Trek. It's just insane.
Isn't that insane?
That we would ever do that.
So I'm going to tell this story once on this podcast, and I'm never going to tell it again. Let me get it out of my system.
All right. This is a one time only.
One time only. All right. So here's my Star Trek 4 story. When I was in college, I went to a photography show, and Leonard Nimoy was doing a photography show. It was in the year 2000, and I saw a big sign that said Leonard Nimoy. I'm like, I got to go to that. So I went in, I got tickets, and he did this photography show, and there was a lot of press there, a lot of media. I showed up really early. I was very excited to see Leonard Nimoy, and I stood in the front, and as I stood there, it was like standing room only thing. All the people came in, and the whole room filled up, but I was in the very front center. The show starts, Leonard Nimoy walks out, there's a podium. So it's like this, where you're Leonard Nimoy and I'm here. And
wow.
Leonard Nimoy is talking about his photography. His photography, he took a lot of photographs of women, and people will talk about that. But if you actually went around the place and looked at all his photos, it was about a lot of stuff. When he gave his speech about what his photography was about, his photography was about life and about everything.
Right.
So he stood there and he talked about all that. So he's like staring at me like this and like telling me about all his thoughts about like life. And I was like, Mr. Spock is telling me all the secrets of the universe right now. And it was like the greatest thing that ever happened to me in my entire fucking life.
Wow.
And I got to meet him after that. And he was like, sometimes I don't know if you've ever met celebrities, but a lot of times when you meet your heroes, you meet celebrities, they do not live up to what your image of them is.
Absolutely.
But Leonard Nimoy did.
Wow.
100%. But here's what happened, though. So I wanted to go up and I wanted to talk to him, and a lot of people were doing that. It wasn't just me. And everybody was coming up to talk to him. And so I was kind of like waiting around, and there was a table, like sort of like this, and it was a craft table, and there was cheese, and there was wine, and all that stuff, crackers. So it calmed down for a second, and because the media was all after him and everything, but there was a moment of like nobody was after him for a second. He walks over to the table to get himself like a piece of cheese, and he puts it like on a cracker. And I'm like trying not to look, I'm trying to like be respectful, but I'm like kind of like watching like over. I'm like over there, and I'm like kind of like watching because I wanted to walk up and like say hi. So he's putting the cheese on the cracker. He gets himself a little wine, and he turns around with his cheese and cracker, and there's a giant man standing there,
right.
And he goes, "I came up with the idea for Star Trek 4 before you did." And Leonard Nimoy looks at him and goes, "Oh, okay," and like walked away.
Wow.
Into the other room, and I was like, good for him.
Yeah.
But so that's my personal story of Star Trek 4. I just like I like that he responded that way. But Star Trek 4 was the first Star Trek movie I ever saw. I saw it in theaters. We recently talked about this actually on Hack the Movies, I think, because we also talk about Star Trek 6 recently. So yeah, we're talking a lot about Star Trek. So check that out soon too, or if it's already out, I don't know. Star Trek 4 was always my favorite, but it's the movie that you have to see with other people. At least see it like in a party environment. Like just don't watch it by yourself, because I watched it by myself and it's like boring. It's like kind of a comedy movie. So if you're sitting there watching it by yourself, it's not as funny. But if we watch it with a group of friends, or if you go to a theater like this Fathom Events thing, that's exciting to me, because that's the way to really watch the movie in a theater. Because when you hear other people laughing, you're like you pay attention a little more. You know, it makes you get more into it.
I'm really sentimental about Star Trek 4 because it was something I watched with my grandma. My grandma came from Europe. She lived through World War II, all the stuff, but she came to America, and the way she learned English and did things was from movies and TV and things like that. And she had very few, all of her movies were bootlegs. She had no, like, oh, it's in the
just
box.
Like, you mean like tape it off TV?
Like it's like taped off TV, right? And there was two that she really liked to watch, and one of them was Beverly Hills Cop, right? Which is funny. But the other movie she really liked to watch was Star Trek 4.
Yeah.
And what I think's interesting about Star Trek 4 is I think it's the most movie Star Trek movie. And what I mean by that is it's self-contained. You don't really need to know much about Star Trek to like Star Trek 4, because it's a movie about Earth. It's about San Diego. It's about all of that. But yeah, she used to put that on, and you know, that kind of made her a cool grandmom, because it's not like she's putting on like Dr. Zhivago or Dances with Wolves or something like
that you didn't want to watch.
Old person stuff. You know, she put on Star Trek, and I'm like, wow, this is really cool. And I think her liking that movie kind of really set the stage for me to really like Star Trek, because I was exposed to it so much, and I have those fond memories and things. I do have a question about your Leonard Nimoy experience. Was that something that was spontaneous? Like literally you just saw it and said, I have to go in? Or did you plan
not at all. It was months away. It was on the side of a building. It was in Philly. Yeah. And it was like a big banner or something, and it said like Leonard Nimoy photography show on this date. And then I was like, that's awesome. And then like the next day I went in and like I figured out how to get tickets, and then got tickets to it. And then it was like a month or two later. So I was like waiting for it for a long time. Yeah. Yeah.
You know, when we decided that we were going to do this topic, that we're going to talk about Star Trek 4, because it's, you know, going to Fathom Events, we're obviously going to be there. We're obviously going to watch it. It probably will have come and gone.
I've had the opportunity to watch some of the Star Trek movies before in the theaters. First of all, I saw 4. Everything from 4 afterwards, I saw all of them in the theater.
Right, me too.
Like originally. But I mean, in the recent years, since because they don't have like Star Trek in the theater anymore, I'm not counting the J.J. Abrams stuff because that doesn't count. They've had Fathom events and stuff like that before, and I got to see Star Trek 4 at the Phoenixville, the Colonial, and a lot of people came dressed in like Star Trek costumes and stuff like that. But there was a lot of people there, and I was like, oh yeah, this is how you have to watch this movie. And I also got to see Star Trek 2: The Wrath of Khan at the Smithsonian, where they have their original Star Trek Starship Enterprise. That's why I go to the Air and Space Museum.
Not for the like big history and all the planes from our history, but because the Enterprise is in the lobby.
Because the Enterprise is in the lobby. 100%. I mean, all that stuff's great too, but I definitely went to see the Starship Enterprise because they refurbished it and whatever. And I'm glad that they did that, because it was like falling apart, and they put like money into it, and everybody can go see it, and that's great. They had it there before that, but it was in the shop, in the back of the shop, and I remember seeing it, and I remember looking at it and being like, it doesn't look that good. It was like falling apart.
But now it looks great.
Now it looks great. Yeah.
So anyway, we're talking about Star Trek 4, all of that. I started, writing down on my paper here. I'm like, well, how many Star Trek shows are on the air right now? Like this should be the golden age of Star Trek. It should be the best ever. But to me, it's the worst ever, because right now there are 5.
The golden age of Star Trek was like
TNG, like TOS,
when it was like around Generations time. Yeah, it was like then.
Yeah, so I'm looking at it, I'm like, holy crap! There's 5 Star Trek shows that are in production right now, and if you do the math, there were 5 Star Trek shows. There was TOS, TNG, DS9, Voyager, and Enterprise. Well, right now we got Strange New Worlds, which is like number 1 Spock and Kirk, but you know, the new ones.
Yeah.
And that seems like it might be okay. But the other ones, we got Discovery, which Discovery is a modern sci-fi show. It has very little to do with Star Trek. You know, it could be like any show. Mm-hmm. It just has a Star Trek thing on it. You got Lower Decks, which, you know, I was never a Star Trek the Animated Series person. Mm-hmm. So like Lower Decks, like getting into that like slapstick Futurama type thing.
Star Trek the Animated Series was more like watching an episode of the original series, kind of.
Yeah.
Where the Lower Decks is like a modern comedy. Like, that's not, just because they're animated, those are not comparable things at all.
Picard makes me depressed. That show is just depressing.
Like, you know what? For them to have made that show, the sheer fucking hubris of them to it's I try, people bring it up to me all the time on stream. So this is what people do to me on stream. I'm like, the other day I wanted to do Contra, but beat the game no death, which I've done before, but this time do it only with the pea shooter.
Right.
So I'm working on that, and it was fucking hard to do. It took me like hours to do it. As I'm trying to do it, people keep going, "Hey Mike, Star Trek Picard, Star Trek." Every time I look at the fucking chat, it's Star Trek Picard, because they know it pisses me off.
Right.
I hate it. I still love those actors. Like, they're great. I love like all those people, but like, it's a shame to me that they couldn't get a crew behind that as good as the crew that they got for Cobra Kai.
Right.
Because I loved Karate Kid growing up. That was also one of my favorite things. And the continuation that they've done for Cobra Kai, I think, is perfect, at least so far. They might ruin it coming up, but so far, the first couple seasons, I think, have been like perfect. As much as you could do without Pat Morita being there.
Right.
And it's a shame to me for you know, that, you know, Patrick Stewart and all those guys to come back and for it to be how it is. I just try to not think about it.
I mean, I just want to sum it up.
Yeah.
Picard, I was kind of watching it on whatever. 7 of 9's cool. Oh, they're in the ship. They're going here. They're going there. Whatever. When I saw Brent Spiner in the simulation, he's in the simulation and he's in like the jacket and he like wants to die.
Yeah.
I'm like, man, Star Trek is like this like hopeful. Like,
I remember, like, listen, like I said, I love all those guys. Like, I love Brent Spiner. I've met them. They're all super nice. They're great. But, like, I remember seeing convention footage of him from when Next Gen was on, and he didn't like to do conventions back then, but he went out and he did a convention, and then he got really comfortable with it, and he's hilarious at the conventions and everything. But back then, when the show was actually on, he said that he wouldn't do it when he got old because it wouldn't make sense. And here we are, and he's doing it. So, but also times change, and it's like, whatever. But it's I kind of wish he would have stuck to that and just like when they killed the character, leave it.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is the problem with a lot of modern like sci-fi fantasy stuff, like comic books or Star Wars or Star Trek or anything. Like these things, like we grew up with it. They're part of our youth. They're formative shows. Mm-hmm. Star Trek is a formative show for me. It evolved like me getting older. It's part of who I am as an adult. Mm-hmm. And now all of these new directors and new studios and everything get these properties, and these properties, they need to make hundreds of $1 billion. They need to make all this money, right? So they have to pander to all these audiences and everything. Mm-hmm. And I think we've reached the breaking point where, you know, none of these shows make any sense.
Yeah.
In the context of what the show originally was, because
it's a disaster.
It's a disaster. They can't make that. And we
also, so as Ryan's saying, there's five Star Trek shows like running or being made right now. Previously in the history of all Star Trek, there was 5 shows over the course of 40 years, something like that. Also, another thing like people tend to forget sometimes is 25 years of that was only the original series.
Yeah.
You know, there was like a long period where it was just that, and then all these other shows came in. And I remember seeing because I watch a lot of like the behind the scenes shit, and like they the original crew, they didn't like that. They're like wait, this is our shit. We've been doing this for 25 years, and then all these other motherfuckers came in. I don't really blame them. Like,
Yeah.
I'd feel that way too. I think they got over it since then, but I think there's too fucking much of it, and it reminds me of what's going on also with Star Wars. And I said this before, but I'm gonna say it again. They did a big press conference, and there's going to be this Star Wars show. And by the way, I know Mandalorian's supposed to be good and all that, and that's fine. But sure, so you have Mandalorian, and that's good. But then you have this Star Wars show, and this one, I don't even know the names of all of them, but they announced like 11 of them or something.
Yeah.
All these different Star Wars things. And let's say that I love Star Wars more than anyone, and I accept it all. Like, I just love it. I eat it all up. Even if you're a person that you don't even criticize it, you love it all, how do you have time to watch that much media? You can't even, you can't consume that much unless that's literally your whole fucking life.
And the thing that's frustrating is, like, they made 3 Star Wars for a long ass time. And they got their mileage. The reason why Star Wars was $1 billion property is because right now, me and you could go in the other room, put on A New Hope or put on Empire, watch it, and have a good time.
Absolutely.
But now we got the Bad Batch and the Mandalorian and this Clone Wars.
The Bad Batch?
The Bad Batch.
I haven't even heard of that one.
Yeah, it's a cartoon.
Okay.
You got Rebels and this, and it's like, it's disposable.
Right.
Which the reason why these properties have value is because they weren't disposable. They were unique and different. And you know, I think that these things kind of need to die, and there kind of needs to be something new.
I got to throw out one other thing about it. I will say this though. So with Star Trek and the Next Generation and that whole and Deep Space Nine and all that, we had so much good Star Trek that it was like that's a lifetime's worth of Star Trek that we had a good Star Trek. These companies, they own these properties, and listen, they own it. We don't. We can complain as much as we want as fans, but they can do whatever they want. And they own this shit that they know they can make money on, and they're just going to make money on it. I don't think they're not going to say this, but I don't think they give a shit. They just want money.
Absolutely.
And that's all it is to them. It's just a way for them to make some extra money. And if it eventually fizzles out and dies out, they don't care. They just want their money.
But the thing is I'm ready for them to be on to the next thing. I hope it fizzles out. I hope it dies. Because what these people need, what we need, what
the only way that's going to happen is if all the fans actually stop watching all the stuff, and that's what needs to happen.
And then they'll have to try something new, and eventually maybe we'll get another Star Wars or another Back to the Future or another something that fucking matters, which is what is sorely lacking.
Yeah, absolutely.
But we're here to talk about video games.
Yeah, right.
So
because we can make the whole podcast about Star Trek easily. But yeah, so I do want to talk about what I've been playing. I've been playing Gungeon is the game that I'm bringing to the table this week. You had brought up to me Nuclear Throne.
Yes.
First of all, tell me about what you think about Nuclear Throne, because you played that, right?
So Nuclear Throne is a game where it's arcade action, it's a twin stick shooter, it's a roguelike. It's meant to be played in loops where you get good enough that you can keep going from level to level to level and get to the end. And once you develop that level of skill, every time you beat a level, you get power-ups that enhance your character. And you can just keep stacking them till the game is easy enough for you, and you're skilled enough that you could just play and play and play.
Right.
Roguelikes take what shooters have, like a shooter like Gradius, where you need to get the power-ups and get to the point where you could fight what's against you and make that the point. Right? Whereas Gradius has, it has the levels you get through, you do that sort of thing, like any other shooter. In roguelikes, it's like, you better get the right power-ups. You better get good. This game doesn't care about you.
Well, I would say stuff like Gradius or whatever doesn't care about you either. That shit's fucking brutal too.
There's little to no progression that carries from level to level. Like in the case of Nuclear Throne, you can unlock additional like characters, but outside of that, it's this playthrough is what matters.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a little okay. So that's a little different than Enter the Gungeon. But so I had started playing. First of all, I played Binding of Isaac, which is probably one of the more popular, roguelikes like that, and that's a little bit more comparable to Zelda. Where this is more of a twin stick shooter, so it's more comparable to Nuclear Throne. So I started playing Enter the Gungeon. I told Ryan, "Hey, I'm playing Enter the Gungeon," and he's like, "Oh, you need to play Nuclear Throne." So what happened to me is I'm like, "Oh, okay, I guess maybe it's the game it's based off or something." So I downloaded Nuclear Throne and I started getting motion sickness from it. Yeah, I was getting motion sickness from it, and it just wasn't working great for me, unfortunately. I played it for a few minutes, but I had to stop. That happens to me sometimes. I remember it happened to me with Dark Souls 2, and it happened to me with Mario Odyssey. I couldn't really get Nuclear Throne to work that great, but I do think, just from footage that I've seen, because I looked at footage on YouTube too, and I think that Enter the Gungeon probably is largely sort of based on that, or other roguelikes that came before. And I mean, listen, there's a whole history of roguelikes. Then I started to look into the history of roguelikes.
Yeah.
And you can go back, and I haven't played some of the earlier ones yet, but I'd like to. There's other types of roguelikes that aren't like shooters like that, because like Enter the Gungeon is like a twin stick shooter, and it's also kind of like a bullet hell.
Yeah.
And so is Nuclear Throne, I think.
Yeah.
There's older ones on like Super Famicom. There's one called Shiren the Wanderer, I think it's called.
Okay.
Where that one isn't like a bullet hell. It's more like a Final Fantasy like RPG, like you're walking around kind of thing. But it's a roguelike. So there's other styles of roguelikes that I'd like to also play eventually too. But this one is very popular, and I brought it to the table today because I had a lot of fun with it. It worked better for me than Nuclear Throne. It's newer than Nuclear Throne, so I feel like it's kind of like a fixed version of that almost. At least that's what I saw. Maybe it works better on consoles or something. But Enter the Gungeon, you get 4 different characters that you can be. There's a Marine, there's a guy that looks like me, and there's 2 other and then there's the 2 other characters. He's the pilot, and then there's 2 other characters that I didn't play as yet. So it's sort of the same thing. You go into the dungeon, but it's called the Gungeon because everything's a fucking pun in the game. Like when you fight some of the bosses, it's always like a gun pun or a bullet. Like a lot of the enemies are bullets and whatever, which is fine. Some of the stuff is actually pretty funny. You get a weapon in the game that is called like the Raiden gun or something like that, and it's from the shmup Raiden,
right?
And there's a lot of references to there's Zelda references in it, and the game is chock full of references. If you like references, if you like the Family Guy and shmups, you'll like this game. But no, I feel like almost talking about this game at this point is a little stupid because like it's a very popular game, so a lot of people have already played it. I bet most of the people watching this now have already played the game. I really liked it, but if you haven't played it, basically you go into a dungeon, you shoot stuff, bullets are flying at you, and you have to go through and collect money. That way, when you die, and you will die because it's hard, you go back to the beginning, there's a shop, you go to the shop, you can like unlock stuff, and then you might get like a better gun or something like that so that your next playthrough you can get a little bit further. And then you keep doing that over and over and over. There's people that put in like thousands of hours on this game. I played it not close to that. It's just fun.
You know what I think is interesting is roguelikes as a genre is that they're so varied. It's not a genre like platformers or first-person shooters or RPGs where there is RPGs are a bad example, but where there's like a set way to play.
There is,
like if you look at Enter the Gungeon and Spelunky 2, which we talked about on this show, are both roguelikes. But the way you play them is totally different, right? But a game like Geometry Wars is a twin-stick shooter, but it's not a roguelike.
Right.
This is unique about roguelikes.
It is, and that's why I brought up like Shiren the Wanderer. And you and I played one that was like platformer roguelike, and I think it was called Dungreed.
Yeah,
years ago on Old Talk About Games, and so there's all these different ways that you can make games out of this genre. But I feel like it might not be something for everybody because some people might not want to do like the same thing again and again and again. You have to like enjoy that. But the way they fix that is, so you go into the dungeon and you're walking around, you're shooting stuff, and then you die. Next time you go into the dungeon, yeah, it's the same thing. You're walking around and shooting stuff, but the layout is always different because it's randomized. And that's how they keep it fresh. Like, every time you go into that dungeon, it's going to be different enemies. It's going to be different map layout. The key will be in a different place. Everything's mixed up, and that's how they make it so that you don't get bored playing it. And I think that's pretty brilliant. And for me, I have fun doing that, and I could put in a lot of hours on it. But because I do live streams, I don't tend to stream things too many times because I don't want to be a streamer who just like. There's some people who only play like Fortnite over and over and over. I don't want to. Like, I need more variety in that with my streams. I have to like keep moving because in my brain, I get bored if I start playing. Even if I love a game, I get fucking bored. I feel like you're like that too.
Yeah. Oh, I always have to play a different thing. That's why I like to play retro games and indie games, because I think I can get the point in the time I have and then move on to the next one.
Yeah.
Like, I recently I played it for 5 or 6 hours, but I played a game called Tales of Ascalon. And Tales of Ascalon is a roguelike where you die.
That one I haven't heard of.
But it's also a Metroidvania where the things that you do in the world stay done when you die. But you level up when you die.
Right.
And then you go back into the castle. And basically it has a reincarnation mechanic where the first time you go in the dungeon, you die and one of your guys casts a spell without the other people knowing.
Yeah.
That makes you reincarnate.
There's
every
a
time
little
you
bit
die.
of that in Enter the Gungeon. Like, one of the goals of it is you have to build like a gun. So every time you're going into this dungeon, you might go down and you might like rescue somebody from one of the dungeons, and then they like give you something, and then when you make it to the bottom level, like the 5th level, there's like this like witch lady, and you have to bring her shit. If you do that, like, let's say you bring her one of the things she needs, you don't have to do that again. Like, that's like permanent, like forever.
Yeah.
But a lot of the rest of the stuff isn't. You know, some of the stuff's permanent, some of the stuff's not permanent. Yeah.
Whereas, when I was talking about Nuclear Throne is a straight roguelike. There's none of that.
Yeah.
You just...
That's a little different. Yeah. That seems a little more hardcore.
Yeah.
I was thinking about that too. I was like, what if there was no upgrades? It would be... I feel like that might be one thing that could deter some like really hardcore people. But the thing is, like, I'd like to play both. Like, I like this because it's, you can upgrade and you can get through the game. But I would also like to play a roguelike where it's just fuck you, make it.
Yeah.
Like, I like that idea too. So I'm open for both.
Yeah, I think that smaller arcade titles have like a commercial issue where it's like, how do the people who make them make money? Mm-hmm. But I think they need to exist.
Yeah.
Those games need to exist. It's so cool when you just pick up a game and that's all it is. This is the game.
Yeah.
We're not trying to do this great RPG. I don't need to put a million hours into it. It's just, here's your gun, fight the guys, fuck you, let's go, and then you're done when you're done, and that's it,
Yeah, those games need to exist. But a lot of people I feel like a lot of developers want to make games more accessible for more people, because an experience like that where it's just like you have to make it, a lot of people are not going to be able to make it, and then we'll get frustrated. So
Mike is playing twin stick shooters, so I'm like, man, I got a twin stick shooter. I played the Ascent, and the Ascent is the exact opposite of what I just said, because it is a twin stick shooter that also it's a looter shooter, so you upgrade your character. It's RPG elements. It's cyberpunk. The best way to explain this game in terms of setting is you take the television show The Expanse and you combine it with Cyberpunk 2077, and that's the storyline.
The first twin stick shooter I remember is Robotron 2084.
Right.
Which, what's funny about if you go back and actually play that, because they had that at the barcade for a while, so I got to play it there. The actual arcade stick for that, if you play the actual machine, is like, it goes in like it's like an 8-directional thing.
Right.
Where if you play like the game you're talking about, or Enter the Gungeon I was talking about, you're playing it on a gamepad, on a controller, to where you have a stick, but that goes in all directions.
Right.
And I feel like it's a different thing when you play an 8-directional bullet hell twin stick shooter like that compared to when you're playing it on console where you can go anywhere.
Right. Like in the case of that, just to illustrate.
Yeah.
Right now, if I'm in Robotron, I can shoot you. I can shoot the camera.
Yeah.
But I can't shoot that chair over
So you got to
there.
move your character.
I got to go like this. Now I can't shoot you, but I could shoot Mickey over there.
And I kind of like that, and I kind of wish they made some. Maybe they do, but wouldn't it be cool if there was like an 8-directional controller, but something for like Steam or PC?
Oh, that'd be interesting.
Like somebody made a game like, hey, this is specifically an 8-directional shooter, like twin stick shooter.
So let me tell you a story about that.
Yeah.
So we made this little game. It's called Eagle Island. It's a roguelike.
Yeah.
And when the game, well, it's a roguelike and a Metroidvania. It's a lot of things, but one thing it was is it had 8-directional shooting when it came out.
Okay.
And you know what the market told us
They
to
didn't
do?
like it.
They said, "No."
You know what? Because modern audiences aren't used to that.
Yeah.
See,
so,
I brought it up because I'm old, so I like that.
Yeah.
But the thing is, I like EntertheGungeon as well.
Yeah.
So I like both. But I see. I feel like there should be a place for both.
Yeah.
But I can understand that today people aren't used to that, so that's probably not going to fly.
It was so contentious when that game came out. Every Steam review was like the 8-direction, the 8-direction, the 8. I'm like, shit. And we patched it. Nick went in, patched it, and now it has the full 360 degree. And people like that a lot better.
Yeah.
But it's interesting how your design decisions affect how people are going to feel. And one thing that might feel good to you may not feel good to your audience. And you got to think, there's a big difference between making games for yourself and making games for an audience. It's the same thing with films, right? You make a personal film versus...
It's like, are you going to try to make money with this, or are you going to try to make this sort of like a passion thing and make it this exact thing you want? That might be very niche.
Exactly.
And only a couple people are going to like appreciate it, really.
So I want to tell you more about the Ascent. In the Ascent, this is a game that was made by a small team. We're talking like 5 people. It's got full AAA looking cutscenes. It's got amazing, detailed, huge environments. It's got the Diablo-esque loot system. It's got all kinds of different guns. It's got crazy effects when you blow people away. It's got all the stuff. It's got cool skills where you have a punch that can like incinerate everybody in front of you. It's got...
I was watching him play it. I want to try it myself. I haven't played it yet.
I mean, this game is sick, and it's got a storyline, and it came out of nowhere. You know how like big titles, like if there's a new Call of Duty or a new Final Fantasy, like that game's coming out way before it did. The Ascent, I was watching a benchmark video. Somebody was benchmarking one of those new handheld PCs, and they're like, oh, let's see how it does in F1 racing or this or that. And then it gets to the Ascent, and I'm like, that's the game I'm playing. Because this looks sick.
I have always been a fan of just dropping things because, like, I like that when the companies, like, hype things up for a long time, you can build up anticipation for a game or a movie or whatever it is, and be like, oh god, it's gonna be this, it's gonna be that, and then when you go see it, probably the ultimate example of that is the Phantom Menace.
Yeah.
People were so hyped for that. Hyped. You had that poster everywhere, that Jake Lloyd in the desert everywhere, and then people are so hyped up they go to the theater, and then it let them down. Could you imagine a situation where George Lucas was able to keep that whole thing secret and then just dropped it? I bet it would have went over a little bit better, at least.
But there are times when it works. Ocarina of Time, I remember coming home from school and my gold cart came in the mail from wherever I ordered it, and I stuck that in after being like, oh, there's going to be a new Zelda game. There's going to be a new Zelda game. Because you have to remember, like, other than a Game Boy, ages and seasons and all that, we went from Link to the Past.
There are times when it lives up to it. Like, Link to the, like, our Ocarina of Time was able to live up to it.
Yeah, but
that's also, like, one of the biggest, greatest games, like, that.
But absolutely. I mean, there's a million other games
that we're not able to,
related to the Ascent. Cyberpunk 2077. I liked it, thought it was fine. I was playing it on a great PC. I know it has issues. That was like the most hyped game that we've had in a while, and it did not meet expectations.
But if they would have just dropped it instead, people would have been like, "Oh, check this out," and it probably would have got better reception.
Yeah, they wouldn't have been pulling it off the PlayStation Store and having their investors sue them and everything. But that's what happens when you have Keanu Reeves and Run the Jewels and all this shit piled on there. It's like the expectations, you can't meet them. You know, we were talking about earlier, like the Star Wars, the Star Trek, superhero fatigue, all of this, it's all the same, right?
Yeah.
The Ascent doesn't have these problems.
Yeah.
Because it was just a game that some guys made, and
Yeah.
Like when I was playing it, I'm like, okay, it's a small team, twin stick shooter, whatever. And then I start seeing full cutscenes. And then I'm walking through a crowd of people and like bumping against them. And a vehicle crashes through a wall and there's fire and effects. And it's just crazy. I'm like, damn.
So you get like tons of different weapons, and can you play as multiple characters? Like, let's hear a little more details about.
So there's basic character creation. The character creation is nothing to write home about. You got some like choices of faces, hair color, hairstyle, like not much like that, right? It's a skill point based system. You get different skill points, like maybe you can dodge better, or you can reload faster.
Is that like a dodge, like you roll out of the way, or like what is like the dodge like?
It's the dodging.
Because in twin stick shooters, the reason I say is it's very important. That's a huge mechanic in Enter the Gungeon. Like, all these bullets are coming at you. You fucking need to be able to dodge out of the way. And stuff.
It's more RPG based. Like I could hit you and like dodge pops up.
Okay.
You know, like
okay.
So it's like that sort of thing. But what's interesting is I think this game handles cover better than so many games. You know, I'm sick of what was that game we played, Outriders, where you like stick to the wall and you have cover.
Yeah.
In this game, you can, because it's a twin stick shooter, you know, it's like everything's coming at you. You can duck, and there are walls that have like height.
Yeah.
So if you duck, your height is lower, and then the bullets like if I was ducking, you couldn't shoot me because I'm behind the table.
I mean, we could do a whole podcast about like stealth games, because it's interesting, because I really liked there's another example of a game you got me on, was Assassin's Creed Origins. I played a lot of that, and I liked that, and there's that whole game is stealth practically, but I really liked it. But there's other games where I get so bored. The characters, you hide behind the box, they shoot you, you pop up from the box, you shoot them, you get back down behind the box. I feel like in the early 2000s, or like that, there was like an era where I felt like everything was just that, and it just got so mind-numbingly boring to me that it put a big distaste in my mouth for the duck and cover shit.
Yeah.
Thank God, you know, we're in an era now where it's like with Steam and indie games and everything. That's why we're doing the show. There's so many different varieties of games and things. But for a little while there, I was like, everything feels like this.
Yeah.
And I was really frustrated by that back then.
Yeah. But in this game, you're not sticking to the wall. It's so fast. Like in this game, this is cover.
Yeah.
Somebody's shooting at me. I get behind here for a second. Maybe not even a second. I hold the button so I can shoot over at them, and then that guy's throwing a grenade at me. So I need to move. So it combines the RPG elements with the bullet hell twin stick stuff.
Yeah.
So it's like in a bullet hell, you're not doing cover. You're not sitting there pop 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 like The Division. Did you ever play The Division?
I don't think I played that yet. No.
Fuck The Division.
Okay.
So Tom Clancy's The Division is the epitome of, I walk up to the little shelf.
Yeah.
I hide behind the little shelf.
Yeah.
I shoot. That game did nothing for me.
Yeah.
And the other reason that game did nothing for me, man, I'm going to roast The Division now.
Okay.
Because the other reason that game did nothing to me is because it, like all the gear was like samey. Like I didn't like any of the gear.
Wait, I got to do this right now. So you know me, I like Pac-Man and Atari.
Yeah.
So I've always heard about this Tom Clancy.
Yeah.
And I always hear about John Madden.
Yeah.
For a long time, I was like, who the fuck is this John Madden guy? And now I know who he is, but I don't know who Tom.
You want me to tell you about Tom Clancy?
Yeah.
Let's go. I'm going to tell you about Tom
I don't
Clancy.
know. I don't know.
Tom,
I've always heard the name though.
So Tom Clancy he's dead. Tom Clancy was a guy who wrote books about the military.
Okay.
He wrote...
Oh, that's right. He was an author.
He was an
Right.
author.
Yeah,
He wrote dramatic books. You ever see movies like Clear and Present Danger?
I never saw it, but I know of it.
Tom Clancy, Rainbow Six, stuff like that. He wrote books very closely with the U.S. military and stuff.
Okay.
Wrote these. Now, Tom Clancy books still come out, even though he's dead.
Mm-hmm.
It's just Tom Clancy's Future War, written by
They just put his name on
other
it.
guy.
Oh my God, that's terrible.
Like, dead serious.
They shouldn't do that.
That's what happens now.
Well, to be fair, that's kind of like it's like when you watch Star Trek and it's like Gene Roddenberry is,
Right.
but not, he's dead.
He has nothing to do with
Yeah.
it. Nothing to do with it.
I am so sorry, but I remember thinking, I'm going to go back to, we started this on Star Trek, but really quick, I just would love to fucking put Gene Roddenberry in front of Star Trek Lower Decks and get his fucking opinion.
Yeah.
What would he fucking say?
Is my son getting paid? That's the question.
I don't know.
Dude.
No. I want to put 1967 Gene Roddenberry in front of it and see what he says.
Right.
When he was doing the cage and shit.
Yeah.
That's what I mean.
Right.
I don't mean like...
Well, first he would have to push the girl off his lap. And then you'd have to clear the smoke from the room.
The green alien girl.
Right.
Yeah.
And then you'd be like, whatever. No, I agree with you.
Yeah.
I'm just talking shit. I agree with you
No,
completely.
he went back and forth with the studio and fought with them to make it like
Yeah,
his vision.
right.
Because they wanted it to be like fucking pew, 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 like everything
Right.
else on television.
Yeah.
And he was like, motherfucker, this is going to be... Anyway, we're on Star Trek again.
No, but you're right. You're entirely right. Like, so in these Tom Clancy games, when he was around, when it was close to Tom Clancy time, they were very specific military games that were as realistic as they could be given the technology. Now they got looter shooters and this and that, and it's so far from what it was intended, just like Star Trek is. The Ascent doesn't have these problems. The Ascent was made by a couple guys, so it's exactly what they wanted it to be.
They were able to keep it like a tight, small crew and make it their vision.
Make their vision.
Yeah, that's
and
cool.
It's super cool. It takes a lot of different genres and brings them together. Using the twin stick shooting for the combat is like, it just feels good.
I saw you playing it. You were like laughing and having fun, so you must have
I
liked
was,
it.
yeah. And the minute I got the rocket launcher and the enemies just like explode in the like blood balloons, like I'm like, this is what I want to be doing. Right? I'm like, get them, right? So it's a good one, and I've been hungry for a Diablo experience. I never got into Diablo 3. I never got into it, but Diablo...
I played a little of Diablo 3 on Switch. I enjoyed it, but I have to say, I actually really like the first Diablo. I played a bunch of Diablo 2 as well, and I like that. Actually, they're all pretty good, but Diablo 1 is the one I like to play. I don't know, because I'm old school like that.
Yeah, Diablo 2, I played a ton, and I liked getting all the items and things like that.
Yeah.
With the Ascent, I'm curious, as I get through it, what are the final, like the badass final guns going to be like?
Right, yeah.
That's going to be insane.
Yeah.
It's going to be insane. And it's exciting, and I think for a lot of people who are disappointed by the combat of Cyberpunk 2077, they should try out the Ascent. And I think for people who wanted an Expanse game, and they didn't get the Expanse game they wanted, they should play this, because the idea of being on a space station and having it be shitty and having to get through the shitty space station and do things is cool. And there's some commentary on AI and things.
Well, I didn't play Cyberpunk, but is that like partially twin stick shooter? Like, I'm not sure why you're comparing that to...
Well, because it's the music's the same, there's like augments.
Oh,
like the
stylistically.
Stylistically.
Oh, okay, not
right?
gameplay-wise.
Oh, no.
Okay.
Yeah, Cyberpunk is full first person.
Okay, yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
I was like, okay.
Yeah. So, but it was really cool, and it totally surprised me.
That's cool. Yeah, I saw footage, I sat next to Ryan while he played some of it. It looked like a game I would play myself. I like twin stick shooter stuff, obviously, that because I brought that as well. There was another one I played years back. It was called Nex Machina. And that was sort of like a voxel style one that was really cool. But that's another genre that's fun. But it's cool how they sometimes will take that and mix it in with like a roguelike, or this sort of mashing up of genres helps, because then it's not just you're playing Robotron and that's all it is. I like Robotron, don't get me wrong. I'd sit and play it, but it's kind of cool when they bring in other elements to it.
One other thing I want to mention about it is, a lot of games these days have like the long preamble where there's a lot of story, there's a lot of like crap and loading. That was my biggest problem with the latest Assassin's Creed. It's like so much fucking plot and loading and waiting and sitting and tutorializing and all this crap. This game, not only does it get you into the action right away, which is pretty good, but it also starts giving you skill points and upgrades, and you're doing the thing.
This is Ryan's big attempt at getting me to try the game, because he knows that I don't like a lot of bullshit in the beginning.
Yeah, dude. Yeah, there's some bullshit, but there's not too much bullshit.
I can sit through a little bit, but
yeah,
I like it when it's like, get to it.
Yeah. So I can't say enough good things about it. Of the games we've played so far, this one's probably the strongest for me.
Really?
Yeah.
That's surprising, because we've played some good shit so far.
Yeah, we have. But I think that this is the one. Well, a Satisfactory's close.
Okay.
But it's different mindset, right?
Yeah.
Because one's like you're
Different
building
type of game,
different type of game. But the Ascent, Satisfactory are pretty close in where they are.
All right, thanks for watching, guys. We will be back next time with more games.